She fainted in his clinic, not knowing the doctor who caught her was the man she once broke in college, the man she never stopped loving. Ela Chen, once a brilliant pre-med student, had walked away from Caleb Hartman, believing she wasn't enough. Years later, fate brings them face to face, and what follows is a journey of healing, second chances, and a love stronger than fear. But just as they're finding their way back, a cruel reminder of their differences threatens everything. Where are you watching from? Don't forget to subscribe for more heart-tugging stories you'll never forget. The moment Ela Chen stepped through the glass doors of Hartman Community Clinic, the sterile scent of antiseptic hit her like a warning. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her worn canvas bag as she approached the front desk, her voice barely above a whisper when she gave her name. The nurse gave a polite nod, tapped on her tablet, and gestured. "Room 3, Miss Chen. Dr. Hartman will be with you shortly." Ila's stomach fluttered, not from the abdominal pain that had lingered for weeks, but from something harder to explain. A tension she couldn't place. Down the hall, Dr. Caleb Hartman slipped on a pair of latex gloves as the nurse leaned in. "Your next patient is in 3. First-time visit. She's a little nervous." He didn't look up. "Name?" "Ela," she replied casually, eyes back on her screen. But Caleb's hands paused mid-motion. "Ela?" he repeated, barely audible. The name struck him like a sudden chill. A slow breath escaped him, but his heart picked up its pace. There were plenty of Ilas in the world, but he hadn't heard her name in 6 years. And no matter how hard he tried, he'd never been able to forget the way she'd looked at him, on the steps behind the university library under the gray weight of a rainstorm, when she whispered, "I can't," and turned away. He walked down the corridor, each step echoing off the pristine floor, like a memory clawing its way out of the past. His chest tightened as he reached the door. When he pushed it open, she was sitting on the edge of the exam table, shoulders hunched, legs swinging just above the floor like a child. Her hair was longer, darker, pulled into a loose ponytail. She wasn't wearing makeup, but he recognized her instantly. The slight arch of her brows, the quiet strength in the way she held herself even now. She looked up, and her eyes widened. "No," she breathed. "It can't be." He cleared his throat, voice slipping back into clinical rhythm. "Miss Chen, I'm Dr. Caleb Hartman. I'll be handling your consultation today." The change in her face was immediate, a flicker of disbelief followed by something closer to panic. She stood abruptly, clutching her bag like a shield. There must be a mistake. I didn't know. I wouldn't have." "You're here now," Caleb said, forcing calm into his voice, though an unmistakable edge ran beneath it. "If you'd like a referral to another doctor, I can request one, but we're short-staffed today. You'd be looking at a 3-week delay." Ela froze. Her eyes darted to the door, then back to him. Her voice dropped. "No, it's fine. I just wasn't expecting this." Neither was I, he thought, but said nothing. He gestured to the table, and she perched on it again, still hugging her bag. "Tell me what brings you in today," he asked, clipboard in hand. "I've been having stomach pain, not constant, but sharp, lower left side." "How long has it been happening?" "A few weeks. I thought it'd go away." "Any fever? Nausea?" "Some nausea. No fever." He nodded, scribbled. "May I?" She hesitated, then gave a small nod. He stepped forward. The space between them thickened. His hands moved with practiced care, but inside he was anything but composed. She flinched slightly when he pressed just below her ribs. "Here?" "A little," she whispered. He moved again. "And here?" "No." When he stepped back, peeling off his gloves, he avoided her eyes. "It's likely mild gastritis," he said, "but I'll run some labs just in case. I'll write you a prescription to manage the symptoms in the meantime." She nodded without meeting his gaze. When he handed her the paper, their fingers brushed. She pulled away quickly. "Thank you," she said, her voice too formal, too tight. He opened the door for her, but just before she crossed the threshold, he said it. Softly, not bitter, but raw. "Still not good enough, huh, Ela?" She froze, her back rigid, but didn't turn. She walked away without a word. Caleb stood in the doorway watching the space she left behind, the paper still warm from her hand, wondering why her silence now hurt more than her rejection ever did. The second time Isla walked into the clinic, she told herself it was just a follow-up, nothing more. She had rehearsed it in her head. She would act normal, keep it professional, avoid eye contact, answer questions, take the prescription, and leave. simple, clean, distant. But the moment she stepped into the familiar corridor, her stomach clenched tighter than it ever had from the pain. The walls felt narrower, the lights overhead too bright. Room 3 waited like a trap. Caleb Hartman looked up from his notes when the door opened, his expression unreadable. "You're on time today," he said flatly, but there was a glimmer of something else, surprise, perhaps relief, underneath the practiced tone. Hila gave a small nod, her lips pressed into a polite line. "Subway ran smoothly," she replied, setting her bag down beside the chair. "No dramatic arrivals this time." He didn't smile, but she noticed the subtle ease in his shoulders. He gestured to the seat again. "I brewed tea," he added, motioning to a ceramic mug resting near the sink. "Thought the weather might slow you down." Hila blinked. "Tea?" "Caffeine-free," he said quickly, then shrugged. "Chamomile. You looked cold last time." She didn't know what stunned her more, his memory or the fact that he had prepared anything for her. "Thanks," she murmured, sitting slowly and wrapping her hands around the warm mug. The exam proceeded as it should have, routine vitals, brief questions about her symptoms, but the air between them had changed. It wasn't as sharp-edged as before. It was quieter, heavier in a different way. When Caleb asked about her pain, his voice was soft, almost hesitant. She answered carefully, noting that the cramps had lessened, though a dull ache remained. "Likely stress-related gastritis," he concluded, writing a note. "I'd still recommend finishing the meds and switching to a bland diet for a few days." Hila nodded. "No more coffee. Got it." A ghost of a smile flickered at the corner of his lips. "That might be the hardest part." "You have no idea," she said. For a moment, their eyes met, and the silence felt full again, not awkward, but charged with something unsaid. As she reached for her bag, he hesitated, then asked, "Can I ask you something?" Hila paused, shoulders tensing. "You can try." Caleb set the chart down. "Back then, did you ever like me? Even a little?" She wasn't prepared for that. Of all the things he could have asked, the medical, the mundane, the safe, he had chosen the question that hit the deepest. She looked down at her lap, fingers tracing the seam of her jeans. "Why ask now?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Because I've spent 6 years wondering," he said simply. And maybe if I knew the answer, it hurt a little less. The room was still, like the quiet before thunder. Hila stood slowly, adjusting the hem of her sweater. Her eyes never rose from the floor, but her voice, when it came, was steady. "Yes," she said. "I did." Caleb blinked. "You did?" She finally looked up, her eyes shimmering with something fragile and unresolved. "I liked you so much it scared me." She didn't wait for his response. She turned, walked to the door, and left him standing in the middle of the room, his breath caught between disbelief and something like regret. That night, Hila sat on her couch in her small apartment, a cup of tea going cold in her hands. Across from her, Talia watched her silently, brow furrowed. "You've been quiet all night," she said eventually. "More than usual." Hila gave a weak smile. "I told him," she said softly. "Told who what?" "Caleb. I told him I liked him, back then." Talia blinked. "Wait, you what?" "I said it," Hila whispered, "and then I left, again." Talia shook her head, incredulous. "Why did you say no all those years ago?" "I never asked." Hila stared into her cup. "Because I didn't think I deserved him. My dad had just walked out. My mom's diagnosis was getting worse. I was working night shifts just to keep food on the table. I dropped out of pre-med. Caleb had everything. Grades, reputation, a future. I couldn't even afford my textbooks. What could I possibly give someone like him?" "Love," Talia said gently. "You could have given him love." "I was scared," Hila whispered. "Still am." At the clinic, Caleb sat at his desk long after closing, flipping through Hila's file for the first time beyond the surface. The facts spilled out. Columbia pre-med dropout, emergency contact listed as her mother, psychiatric history noted, employment records showing retail and overnight care. He closed the folder slowly, fingers resting on the cover. So many things he'd never known. All the pain she'd carried, all the sacrifices she'd made. She hadn't run because she didn't care. She ran because she did. Hila didn't even realize she had swayed until the floor tilted beneath her feet. One moment she was answering Caleb's routine questions about her sleep, her appetite, the lingering pain. The next, her vision narrowed, her voice caught mid-sentence, and everything blurred. Caleb's voice was the last thing she heard, sharp, alarmed, before the world went dark. When she came to, A cool cloth pressed gently against her forehead, and the faint beeping of a wall clock ticked somewhere in the distance. The air was softer here, dimmer, and she quickly realized she wasn't in the exam room anymore. Her body lay curled on a padded bench in the staff break room, a folded jacket under her head. She blinked, struggling to sit up, but a hand gently steadied her shoulder. "Hey," Caleb said softly. "Take it easy." She looked at him, dazed. "What happened?" "You fainted," he answered, crouching beside her. "Low blood sugar, probably exhaustion. You haven't been eating properly, have you?" "I've been fine," she said instinctively, trying to wave it off, but even her hand felt like it was moving through syrup. "Just tired." "Ela," he said gently but firmly, "you passed out cold in my office. That's not just tired." She looked away, ashamed. "I didn't want you to see me like this." "But I do see you," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Not the version you try to present. The real you. The one who's fighting. Every single day." Her throat tightened. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had looked at her like that, with compassion that didn't feel like pity. His hand brushed a strand of hair from her damp forehead. It was so tender, so careful, that her heart ached from the simplicity of it. "If this is the second chance I never thought I'd get," he said quietly, "then I want to say what I should have said back then." She looked at him, breath caught in her chest. "And what's that?" "That I wouldn't walk away. I wouldn't leave. Not again. Not if you let me stay." Isla's hand, still pale and cold, reached for his, her fingers curling gently around his. They stayed that way for a long while, her head tilted slightly toward him, eyes full of something new, something healing. The next time she came in, it wasn't for a medical emergency. Her steps were steadier, her voice clearer. There were still shadows under her eyes, but they no longer dragged her down. Instead, she looked like someone who had remembered how to stand tall. Caleb noticed the change immediately. "You're doing better," he said after checking her vitals. "I'm trying," she answered, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. They didn't speak for a moment, the silence between them no longer awkward but intimate. As she gathered her things, he hesitated, then cleared his throat. "Would you want to go for a walk?" he asked. "There's a park nearby. Just 20 minutes. Nothing formal." Ela blinked, surprised. "You mean now?" "Unless you have somewhere to be," he added, quickly backpedaling. She looked down at her shoes, then up into his eyes. Her lips curved into something small but sincere. "I'd like that." The walk began quietly, the kind of quiet that didn't need to be filled. The city hummed around them, but inside the cocoon of the park, time felt slower. They stopped under a maple tree, branches like open arms, and sat on a bench that faced the river. They talked, really talked, about the awful coffee from college, the professors who terrified them both, the time she snorted laughing during a chemistry lab. Caleb shared stories from his residency, some grim, some absurd. Isla told him about the bookstore, how she still read medical journals at night just to see if she still remembered. Sometimes she even quizzed herself for fun. "You never really left medicine," Caleb said with a soft smile, watching her. "Sometimes I wonder if it left me," she replied. He looked at her for a long moment, the wind playing with strands of her hair. "I don't think it ever did. I think it was waiting for you." And maybe, Isla thought as their shoulders brushed lightly, so was he. The next few weeks settled into something that almost felt like rhythm. Isla returned to the clinic twice more. Once for a follow-up, another just to drop off paperwork. Caleb remained professional, but the borders of their interactions blurred gently. He told her about the toddler who mistook a blood pressure cuff for a monster's arm. She teased him about his tragic coffee addiction and the fact that he still hadn't changed his ringtone since college. There was laughter, short but real, and moments where their eyes met and lingered a second too long. Slowly, quietly, the wall between them began to thin. At the bookstore, Talia raised an eyebrow one morning as Ela refilled the display of new releases. "So you and Dr. Heartthrob, what's going on there?" Ela rolled her eyes. "It's not like that." "Really? You sure? Because last time you looked like you were floating out of here after your appointment." "We're talking, that's all." Talking. Medically?" "Medically," Isla said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You do know you rejected a man who made half the pre-med girls cry when he walked past, right?" "What's your excuse now?" Ila hesitated. "He's not the same. Maybe you aren't either, Talia said softly and walked away. The thought stayed with Hila as she stepped into the clinic later that week. Caleb greeted her with a nod, already wearing his stethoscope. He listened to her heart, counted her breaths, and asked gently, "Still anxious?" "A little," she admitted. "Breathe slowly. I'll count you down." She closed her eyes and listened to the steadiness of his voice, grounding her, guiding her. When she opened them again, he was still watching her. Not with the clinical detachment of a doctor, but with something quieter, something careful and deeply human. "Hila," he said, taking a step back. "Can I ask you something?" She straightened slightly. "You can try." "Do you think," he began, his voice almost hesitant, "that maybe we could try again, not just as doctor and patient, as something more?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood smoothing the hem of her sweater with shaking hands. "I'm not sure," she whispered. "I'm still figuring myself out." "I get that," he said. "But I need you to know, I never stopped hoping." Before she could respond, a soft knock interrupted them. A nurse poked her head in with a message, and just like that, the moment passed. Isla left that day with more questions than answers. 2 days later, she stood outside the clinic on her break, a coffee in one hand and a paperback in the other. The day was warm, the breeze gentle, when a woman in a navy blazer and pointed heels approached from the parking lot. She walked with purpose, elegance, the kind that came from confidence and connections. "You're Isla, right?" the woman asked, voice smooth. Isla stood, instinctively wary. "Yes. I'm Vanessa Lowell. I used to work with Caleb at Colia General. Years, actually." Isla nodded slowly. "He's special," Vanessa said, adjusting her handbag strap. "Always has been. Too kind for his own good, and generous. But he comes from a very different world, Isla." "I know," Isla said quietly. "Do you?" Vanessa tilted her head. "Because men like Caleb don't stay. Not with women who don't fit the picture. He could be with anyone." Isla's smile was tight. "Thank you," she said, turning away before Vanessa could see the doubt in her eyes. That night, Isla lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Vanessa's words echoed like a drumbeat in her mind. He could be with anyone. He didn't belong with someone who clipped coupons and washed clothes in hospital sinks. She thought of her old textbooks, still in boxes under the bed, of her mother's medical bills, of her own exhaustion, still lingering behind her ribs. So she stopped answering his texts, canceled her next appointment. Then another. Then a third. Caleb noticed immediately. After the third missed visit, he called the bookstore. Talia answered. "She's not in today," she said carefully. Then after a pause added, "But if you care about her, maybe you should go see her." It was raining when he arrived. The streets glistened under the city lights, and fog clung to the windows of the bookstore. He waited outside under the awning, water dripping from his collar. Then the door opened. Hila stepped out, umbrella in hand. She stopped cold when she saw him. Her face was pale, her breath hitched. "You're avoiding me," he said, voice raised above the rain. "And I think I deserve to know why." She looked away. "I just needed time." "Did someone say something?" he asked, stepping forward. "Because I can guess who." She didn't deny it. "You think I could have anyone?" Caleb's voice cracked slightly. "Then why do I keep choosing the one person who keeps walking away?" Tears filled her eyes. "I don't want to be a weight. A burden." "You're not a burden," he said. "You're not something I carry. You're someone I walk beside." She stared at him, trembling. "I don't need perfect, Isla. I need real, and I've never wanted anyone more." The umbrella slipped from her hand. She stepped forward into his arms, into the rain, and kissed him. The rain had cleared, but a pale gray stillness lingered over the city. Hila sat curled on the couch in Caleb's apartment, a thick throw draped around her shoulders and a mug of peppermint tea cradled in her hands. Across from her, Caleb read from a medical journal. Legs stretched out, socks mismatched, one navy, one gray. The ease between them had begun to feel natural, like slipping into a rhythm they'd been meant to play all along. The sharpness of their early reunions had dulled into something gentler, a quiet companionship born not of perfection, but of understanding. Hila had re-enrolled in pre-med prep classes at night. On weekends, they volunteered together at the community outreach clinic in the Bronx. She took vitals and greeted patients with the same care she once reserved only for books. Caleb handled more intensive cases but always found a way to look her way across the room, sometimes with a smile, sometimes with just a quiet glance that said, "I see you." One Saturday, after their shift ended, he handed her a bottle of water as they wiped down exam tables. "You shine here," he said simply, watching her as she tucked her hair behind her ear, cheeks flushed with effort. "So do you," she replied, voice soft, "but I think you always have." Not everything was easy. When Caleb told his mother he was bringing someone home, the hesitation was almost audible through the phone. Margaret Hartman was elegance incarnate, sharp eyes, sharp words, and a wardrobe full of muted tones that spoke louder than anything she said. She welcomed Isla with a polite smile and a glass of white wine, but her gaze was heavy, weighing Isla like a question she already thought she had the answer to. Dinner was cordial, formal, too quiet. Afterward, while Caleb stepped out to take a call, Isla wandered into the conservatory, trailing her fingers along the polished piano keys. Margaret joined her, heels clicking softly on marble. "I've heard a lot about you," she said, her tone smooth but cool. "I'm sure you have," Isla answered, keeping her posture calm, even as her chest tightened. "Caleb speaks of you often. I imagine that surprises you." Margaret didn't reply right away. Her gaze drifted toward the garden beyond the glass. "He comes from a certain world, Isla, one that expects a particular presentation." "I'm not from that world," Isla said, voice steady, "but I'm not pretending I am either. I'm not here for appearances. I'm here because I see him, not the title, not the expectations, just him." There was a long pause. Then, almost imperceptibly, Margaret gave a single nod. "Sometimes," she said, "what matters most is being seen." The next evening, Caleb led Isla up to the rooftop garden behind the clinic. It was quiet, the air warm with the scent of jasmine. Golden light spilled across the sky, painting the buildings in soft orange and rose. "This," he said, stopping beneath a trellis heavy with vines, "was where I realized I might lose you again." Isla looked around. It was the same place she had collapsed weeks ago, too exhausted to stand. The memory clung faintly to the stone. "I made a promise to myself that night," he continued, turning to her. "If I ever got another chance, I wouldn't waste it." Then, slowly, Caleb reached into his coat pocket. He lowered to one knee. Isla gasped, her hands rising instinctively to her mouth. "I don't need perfect," he said, voice trembling just enough to feel real. "I just need you, all of you, as you are." He opened the box, a simple, elegant ring catching the last of the sun. "Will you marry me, Isla?" Tears spilled freely down her cheeks as she laughed and nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Caleb, always." He stood and pulled her into his arms. They held each other in the fading light, the weight of past choices dissolving into something steady, something new. Weeks passed, but the changes between them didn't fade. They deepened. They were no longer doctor and patient or ghosts from another time. They were partners, co-creators of something honest. Isla passed her exams with quiet pride. Caleb published an article on expanding access to healthcare. Together, they expanded the clinic's community outreach program. One afternoon, while helping organize donation bins, Isla called to him. "Room 4's ready," she said over her shoulder, clipboard in hand, stethoscope around her neck. "Coming," he replied, brushing her fingers lightly as they passed. A patient giggled nearby. "Are you two married?" the little girl asked innocently. "Not yet," Isla replied with a grin. "But you love each other, right?" Caleb crouched beside her. "Very much. You're like the people in cartoons who kiss at the end." "Something like that," Isla said, and smiled. Later that evening, as they locked up the clinic and strolled down the hallway hand in hand, Isla stopped. "Caleb?" He turned immediately. "What is it?" She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded black and white printout. His brow furrowed as he opened it and froze. Her voice trembled. "I wanted to tell you here, where everything started." Caleb didn't speak. He stepped forward and wrapped her in his arms, holding her like the whole world had narrowed to this moment. "You're going to be an incredible mother," he whispered into her hair. "And you," she replied, eyes shining, "already are the father you never thought you'd be." They stood in silence, the echo of new beginnings around them. Love had returned, not when everything was perfect, but when they were finally ready to choose it. Again, and always. Life lesson. Sometimes, love doesn't show up when everything is right. It shows up when we are at our most uncertain, our most vulnerable. Isla and Caleb's story reminds us that the past may shape us, but it does not have to define us. We all carry wounds, some visible, some buried deep, but healing begins the moment we allow ourselves to be seen, fully, without pretense or fear. Isla believed she wasn't enough because of where she came from, what she had lost, and what she had to give up. Caleb thought he had been forgotten. But the truth was, they had never stopped carrying each other in quiet corners of their hearts. It wasn't wealth or status or timing that brought them back together. It was the courage to be honest, to confront fear, and to choose love, even after being hurt. This story is a powerful reminder that the people who are meant for us may come back when we're finally ready. Not perfect, not polished, just real. And that, sometimes, is all it takes to begin again. If this story touched your heart, tell us, where are you watching from? We'd love to know. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more deeply emotional stories about love, healing, and second chances. Tap that subscribe button, like the video, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that stirs your soul. See you in the next one.